let's turn it over to our second last speaker, because I believe there's somebody else who is going to come now. It is my pleasure to introduce Kristyn Wong-Tam, member of the Provincial Parliament for Toronto Centre, who has been serving in Ontario's Legislative Assembly since 2022 as a member of the Ontario New Democratic Party. Passionate advocate for 2S LGBTQ+ rights, Kristyn is currently the critic for, I'm going to do that again, 2S LGBTQ+ rights. It's always a mouthful. I always try to get it right, but I have to do it slowly. So she's the critic for that, the Attorney General, and small business. They also serve as a member of the Standing Committee on Justice Policy, which was where I got to meet her for the first time, which was great. And prior to their role at Queen's Park, Kristyn served on Toronto City Council from 2010 to 2022. Please join me in welcoming Kristyn Wong-Tam.
Thank you so much, Erin, and thank you for all of you. I can imagine the type of day that you've had. Each of you are subject matter experts and obviously leaders in your sector. I want to just acknowledge that the work that you do is very challenging. And thank you. I get one of these. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great, fantastic. I know I don't have a lot of time, so who is my timekeeper? Oh, fantastic, you're over there. Okay, you can just sort of flag me if I'm running out of time. I want to just say thank you to Jelinek, Ellis, Gluckstein for bringing this community together. I recognize that that this is a very special gathering of folks. I know that you had a really full day thus far. I'm also incredibly aware that there aren't opportunities like this that come up often. So I want to say thank you to the firm, to Simona, to Erin, to Vanshika, and to all the people who really bring it together. We are in a very challenging state of time in the province of Ontario, and I'm not saying this to be hyper-partisan. I'm saying this because it's fact. You work in the sector. You are trying to provide support to survivors in the continuum of services that survivors need in order for them to gain access to service, access to justice, however survivors want to define it. And I want to be really clear that it's not always through the courts. And I want to be absolutely mindful that it should be survivor-led and designed. And, oh, okay, great. So I've got a lot of slides, but I'm going to go through them very quickly. I was trying to figure out what to entitle this presentation, and I'm just going to rely on something that you folks have heard for the years and probably for the years ahead to come. Justice delayed is justice denied, you know this. And I decided to give it a subtitle about how Doug Ford is failing women in Ontario. It felt right to me. So as Erin has pointed out, our party, the Ontario NDP, has put out a number of bills. And this doesn't even cover the type of legislation that we have advanced. Our party is very much steeped in the foundations of feminist principle. We strongly believe in the advocacy and the advancement of women, and we want to do it with the movement. We want to be intersectional in our approach. But the issue of intimate partner violence has gripped the attention of, I would say, the province, but also around the world. We've been hearing, okay. We have been hearing about this issue somewhat around the time of the pandemic because people were forced to stay home. You didn't have the reprieve anymore of leaving for a few hours with your kids to the library. You were kind of stuck together. And what we saw around the world globally was a surge of violence in homes. So partners were not able to escape, and neither were the children. So we were in this remarkable vortex for the very first time. We also have now seen the media, thank you, pick up this issue in ways that I haven't seen in some time. Obviously, we've heard about the Me Too movement, and we have seen, different spikes in activity throughout the years. As an adult, I can think of the moments, and I'm sure you can share those moments with me. But this has been sustained knowledge, sustained interest from the media. And so we have an opportunity where we just keep going, and I'm going to speak to that closer to the end of my slides. The IPV bill is 15 words long, like literally 15 words long. And it really has the province of Ontario declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. What we hope to do is set a baseline of understanding that the issue is current, it's pervasive, and it needs immediate attention. Very similar to how all governments work together during the COVID response. Warlike speed, that we kept hearing the Prime Minister, the Mayor, and the Premier talking about how they were going to tackle the issue together. I wanted that level of government attention to come together, bringing the power of the ministries to address what we know is an epidemic. And as you will all know, because you sit in this space, you work in this space, is that this comes out of a 2022 report from the coroner's jury inquest to the triple femicide in Renfrew County, where we saw the killing of Carol Kulinak, Anastasia Kuzik, and Natalie Warmerdin. These women who were killed by their former partner in 2015 manufactured a report that took several months to write. Sorry. What I wanted to say is that report produced 86 recommendations. Many of you will follow those recommendations. They fall within the province of Ontario what to do to prevent IPV. We know that it's preventable. There are signs in advance, and this is something that we've been hearing through the committee. So I literally took the top line recommendation of the Renfrew report and put that into a bill, introduced the bill in April. Many of you might have been a part of that debate, either in the room or perhaps following online. The government of the day, the Ford government, took the bill and sent it to committee for further study. Never mind, we have 20 years of the Domestic Violence Death Review Committee of studies and reports that have not been acted on. Never mind the Renfrew report. Never mind the fact that we also have the Nova Scotia Mass Casualty Commission or the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's National Report. It's not like the issue hasn't been studied, but they decided to send it off to the committee. But on April the 10th, they also made a commitment, the Ford government made a commitment that they were going to support the bill. And so that's 231 days ago that they said they were going to support the bill. And over 882 days since the Renfrew County inquest came out. And we still don't have the declaration in Ontario. So where we are now with this bill is that it's sitting in subcommittee. I want to tell you a little bit about what's happened in the subcommittee, which is broken into 3 phases. Phase 1 was we heard from 100 subject matter experts. And I spent most of my summer in committee. And we invited these subject matter experts, and Aaron and Vanshika was there to present on the findings of the firm and the positions of the firm on how we could strengthen the laws of Ontario to support survivors. We also heard from academics, we heard from people in the US, we heard from people from across Canada, and I have to say, much of what was said is not new. It has been said, so we asked people to come out and give their time very freely and willingly to us. We took it. Thank you. We also are now moving into phase 2 and 3. Phase 2 is somewhat different. Phase 2 will allow the ministers to appear before our study committee, which is kind of unique. Queen's Park is like a castle with a moat with the drawbridges up. They really don't want you there, is what I've now learned. And this is after sitting at City Council for 12 years where everything was rather porous. That is not how it is at Queen's Park. And so when a minister appears before the committee, it's a big deal. And generally the government wants to protect them in case something is said that can be embarrassing, because there's the opportunity, unlike question period, which is full of theatrics, there's an opportunity to have a serious conversation. But phase 2 is also warped, because the time to ask questions and to receive answers from the minister has now been truncated to 5 minutes. So in 5 minutes, I get to ask the Minister of the Attorney General, I get to ask the Solicitor General, the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services, 5 minutes of questions, and I get within the 5 minutes answers. So we're going through the motions of the study, and as time rolls by, it's starting to look more and more like we really shouldn't be there because we're wasting time. Phase 3 is when we come out and talk to survivors. We were promised a budget to travel, to go to the north, to fly in communities, to francophone communities, because we were going to come out and hear stories, which is really challenging for everybody who's got to share this story one more time. We have lost our travel budget. We're not going anywhere, and now we're told that survivors will have to tell us their story via Zoom. If there's a safe room in the house or apartment for that survivor to tell us their story, that's great. Assuming they have stable Wi-Fi, assuming they have all the infrastructure they need to tell us their story in 5 minutes. So it's been hard. And so as phase 1 was completed, this just came out yesterday, I think. We were rushing to get our presentation out to you, but obviously 62 femicides in Ontario, and that is a trend that's going up and not down. So I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that we got the information yesterday. Next slide. Thank you. The trends across phase 1, which when we heard from subject matter experts, I want to be specific, is that almost every single day, experts told us to please declare intimate partner violence an epidemic. Set the tone. The foundational floor should be say those words. But we also heard that it was important for the government to increase supports to the sector, whether it be housing, whether it's working with those who are facing vicarious trauma, direct trauma, whatever it is, scale it up and do it quickly. There was also talks about significant time spent talking about the importance of access to justice, make the courts work, because as you know, the courts are not working, and we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. But one big overarching theme is that the issue is preventable, and it is predictable. So every time someone has been killed, it could have been prevented. Next slide, thank you. So I've talked about phase 2 and now phase 3. I'll be very honest, I'm not sure what to do with it. I have still yet to sort through how to honor the survivors that we're going to ask for their opinions and to share their stories, but I'm not sure if I can guarantee your safety and the safety of survivors. So I'm really conflicted because I need to be there as a permanent member of the Justice Policy and as the Attorney General critic, but I am struggling because I don't know how to do it. And so if you want to flag me afterwards, let me know how you think it can be done, because I don't think we've resourced it well. And that's why I'm thinking, do I burn it all down? And this is a serious question. And I'm not one to burn things down. I like to build things up. So I'm really put in a hard position, as are the survivors. Next slide. This is us at committee, and I thought this picture was good because you recognize the back of your head. That's Vanshika, as well as Aaron, when they came before the committee. Next slide. Okay, so yesterday what we did was we asked for unanimous consent, which is a legislative exercise where we can have all parties to come together and just pass the bill, just make the declaration. It's our third opportunity to the government to do that, and it's the third time they declined, despite the fact that OAITH, the Ontario Association of Interval Transitional Houses, was in the House. We were all wearing we were all wearing purple to show our support for the solidarity of the movement and how Twilight Zone-ish to be in that moment, to have the government then say, no, we're not supporting you and the bill. So we can move on. Next slide. Lots of pictures. Okay, I thank my staff. They're amazing. Let's keep going. So what I want to touch upon this because this is important. Access to justice in Ontario is difficult right now. It's even made more difficult if you happen to be a survivor, if you happen to if you have suffered sexual assault. I'm sure there are many statistics that you can share, but what we know is that 580 criminal cases were tossed out alone between 2016 and 2003. This information is very hard to track. Extremely hard to track is because the government is not willing to provide access and information in a timely fashion. The thing that you need to know into the next year, the 2025 horizon, is that in the fall economic statement, which is the mini budget that was just released a couple of weeks ago, is that there is a $500 million cut coming from the justice file. And so if you can imagine what a 9% cut across the ministry looks like, you're going to see reduction in services, reduction in program. There will be layoffs. I don't know where. It was very hard to understand where the disaggregated information was going to be drawn from. So all we know right now is a $500 million cut. If the courts aren't working now, if Ontario currently has the longest lag time in the courts, it's going to become significantly worse. Sorry, Emily, I'm looking at you because I wish I could do better, and right now we're going in absolutely the wrong direction. We also know, for those who work in the justice sector, is that this government came into power in 2018 and they cut 30% of legal aid, and subsequently every year they've been underspending by close to about $100 million. Next slide. So we have seen these numbers as of late. If you've opened up the the CBC, they've been tracking this down. And this is another issue where the media has been staying on top of it. 56% of criminal cases, 56% of overall criminal cases in Ontario have been tossed. You can't get smart on crime if the courts don't work. If you can't get your case to trial and you can't get a guilty verdict, there's no jail time for that person who perpetuated the crime. And this is despite the fact that we have raised this issue. I know that the media has been chasing this down and the government seems to be unwilling to address this. At the same time, what we hear is Mr. Ford is talking about building more jails. And he's moving to modular jails. So these are jails that are like Lego blocks, like housing. They snap together and they are placed on top of each other. So very quick additions is what we're seeing with jails. Next slide. And of course, Catherine Fife and Lydia's Law. So thank you again to the great team here. Next slide. So we've done a lot of, we've been pushing as hard as we can. So this is an interesting statistic, and I say interesting in a heartbreak way, because 59 sexual assault cases last year were tossed. Not because a crime did not take place, it's because it couldn't get to trial or there was not enough evidence. Perhaps later on they decided that as the Crown was constantly reevaluating whether or not they can get a guilty verdict, they decided they couldn't. So anyways, the cases were stayed. Next one. So how do we empower each other? I did mention at the top of my remarks is that I'm seeing a moment, especially around IPV, is that we have sustained media interest. And I know that advocates who work in this sector are not doing it because it's enriching of your bank accounts. I know you're doing it because it's a call. And it's a call to serve your community, a call to support women. It has been really difficult for everybody who works in the nonprofit sector. You're seeing how difficult it is around the budgets. But what I am also seeing is a coalescing of community agencies and partnerships that I haven't seen before. And I would encourage all of you to get louder where you can. I know you're tired. I am too sometimes. I'm like banging my head against the wall. But don't give up. Make sure that everywhere you go, you take up the space where you can, because your voice is absolutely critical. And we know that the research is there. We know that the solutions are possible. And we know that governments do change and priorities will change. And we have seen this government backtrack before around the green belt, when farmers rose up and they made it their issue, when people of the North decided that they were going to fight, the government overreach around the Greenbelt. We also saw it when the government overreached with the notwithstanding clause as it pertained to education workers, Bill 28, and they also were able to back down in, I think, 4 days. So it is not impossible to win, and victories are within our grasp, but we're going to need a hell of a lot more allies. And we're going to need the men to care. We're going to need the husbands and the boyfriends and the grandfathers and the fathers and everyone else to really give a damn and be able to talk about it. It's a tough issue, but we need all of them in order for this government to pay attention on what is truly happening. So where we can shine a light, with respect to the failures of the court, the failures of victim support services. We're going to have to make it louder. And the most compelling narrative is the narrative of survivors and the experiences of those who work with them on how hard it is. And so not only are you bringing the challenge, you're also bringing the solution. And that is what is going to swing this fight to the other side. And I genuinely believe this in my heart, is that we will prevail. It's only a matter of time. And when this government changes, right? When we have a change of government, you'll be there strong enough to make sure that we hold the next government, whoever it will be, hopefully it's the Ontario NDP, but I want you to hold our feet to the fire. Don't let us get away with anything. And of course, get involved with your local riding association. Makes a huge difference. Next slide. This is a pretty awesome photo. It's the day that we actually debated Bill 173. This is the IPV bill. It was really amazing to see the chambers filled, and not oftentimes we've seen the chambers filled, but this was just the NDP caucus room, and you'll recognize a lot of friends and allies who have worked with you side by side. So I want to say thank you to those who were in the room with us. Thank you to you for supporting us from outside of the building. And thank you to all the survivors who have been able to speak up and tell your story. We're doing this because of you. Next slide. So I understand there might be some questions for me, and if not, that's okay too. I think there's still one more speaker. This brings me to the end of my presentation.
I actually work in the federal prison system, and I do work at an institution where it's predominantly sexual offenders. And I'm just from working there, I just wonder if there's a better way to kind of reallocate the resources to kind of create more preventative strategies, because as much as I do think that punishment is warranted based on the offenses, I don't necessarily think it's really having the impact that, you know, people are kind of talking about today. Like, essentially what we're doing is they're being warehoused in these institutions, they're getting programming, but for reintegration, like, is there really, like, and is it the best use of resources as well? Like, it's quite expensive to put someone in a prison system. I think it's about like 100,000 to 300,000, depending on whether it's male or female. So I guess I've been in the system working there for 8.5 years, and I just feel like there's probably, I don't know what the solution is, but I think there's a better way to reallocate the funding to kind of create more preventative strategies. Like you're saying, housing and things like this might be more effective, because I think truly in the prison system, I don't know if we're really addressing the issues in the way that like people want them to be addressed, and then these people go back to the community and very likely some reoffend, right? So I just wonder if the governments are taking these types of things into consideration, because I do hear that there needs to be punishment, there needs to be some kind of action, but working in that system for as long as I have, I don't necessarily see changes in recidivism. I think that people are kind of getting smarter about how they go about doing what they do, and I don't know if it's truly changing the behavior is what I'm getting at, I guess. So it kind of seems like a cycle, and it just seems like the resources could be more effectively allocated to other things. I think would actually have a better impact on like the victims perhaps, and I'm not sure what the appropriate consequence honestly would be for these offenders. But yeah, I'm just seeing like
that's a very important question. Thank you. You know, I focused a lot about justice, largely because I'm the AG critic, but I am also very mindful that the system is not going to work if you don't have support programs that will help someone rehabilitate, as well as resources and supports, investments in communities to prevent the crime from happening. I'm not someone who believes that anyone is disposable. I just don't want to make sure that I don't want you to leave you with the impression that we lock everybody up and throw the keys away. These are, you know, and good people can do bad things. And I recognize that is in all of us. What I want to say is that right now you have over 81% of people sitting in custody detention, government detention, that are awaiting trial. And so it's the folks who have experienced the crime, those who have perpetuated and reported crimes. Everyone is stuck in the queue and no one is moving very fast. And it's costing us a lot. Having someone in government detention, custody detention, does not mean they're getting support. It just means that they're languishing, because you don't actually get support until you've been convicted and you're in the system. And by that time, they would have spent a lot of time in government detention and not receiving the supports that they need to rehabilitate. So it's not uncommon where we see higher rates of recidivism when we don't have the supports in place when someone has been apprehended, or you can even try to support them along the way. I'm not a fan of wasting limited resources, and what I see now is a system that's highly broken, which is why I flagged that the Premier is going to spend more time and money building jails than he will build housing. By the end of this year, that's what we're going to see as a result, and we're not going to get better outcomes. The same reason why we should be building permanent, deeply affordable housing as opposed to constantly expanding our shelter system, which is not sustainable, right? So thank you for that, and I have met many people who work in the correction system who are very frustrated with the underfunding of corrections and the fact that there's a lack of support, which makes your job much more difficult, and I'm very, very mindful of that. Thank you.